Our next discussion, Tackling the World's Biggest Problems, is coming up now. Please welcome to the stage Cara Chacon, Vice President, Social and Environmental Responsibility at Patagonia, Coen Gilbert, co-founder of B-Lab, and Melissa Ho and Esha Chhabra.
Good morning, everyone. We have quite a panel. It's called Tackling the World's Biggest Problems, and we're going to try to do it in the next 30 minutes. So we're going to try to get through this. We have a lot of questions for our panelists this morning, and then we do have a Q&A afterwards for 15 minutes where we have some social media questions coming in. So we've already introduced our panelists, but I wanted to dive right in. Jay, you've co-founded B-Lab. I don't know how many people in the audience are familiar with it. Can you describe what a B Corp is, how many there are in the world today, and the evolution of it?
Sure. So just out of curiosity, how many people have ever heard of a B Corporation? Awesome. So a handful. So one way to think about B Corporations is it's like fair trade, but for the whole company, not just a bar of chocolate or a cup of coffee. Or it's like a LEED certification, but for the whole business, not just the building that it's in. And the reason why that's important is you could have a LEED certified building, but that doesn't tell you much about how the people inside the building are treated, or what's being dumped out the back, or what's being shipped out the front. And so we're trying to look at the entire company, companies like Patagonia, and try to help consumers, try to help workers, try to help investors identify companies that reflect their values and have met the most rigorous standards of overall social and environmental performance, public transparency, and an important thing, which is the legal accountability to balance purpose and profit. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. There are about 3,000 certified B corporations in about over 170 different industries in about 70 countries around the world. About half of them are outside the US. And they range from small sole proprietors to large multinational businesses.
Cara, Patagonia has been a supporter of B Corp from the early days. It was the first B Corp in California, I believe. And you've recently changed your mission statement to, we're in business to save our home planet. As somebody who's responsible for all social and environmental responsibility at Patagonia, what does that translate to for your role in your work on a day-to-day basis?
Well, first of all, we're a really proud B Corporation. We are legally incorporated as a B Corp, and we must show social and environmental good as well as turn a profit. And so that keeps us really honest, and we have to report on that every year, and we get audited as well. And then I'm really glad that you mentioned our new mission statement. We're so proud of that. That was just released last November. And so we're really working hard to figure out what does that mean at Patagonia. And so far, every department is figuring out what else are they going to be doing, because we're already doing so much. The change that I've seen so far is a couple things. One is we've really upped some of our goals around regenerative organic certification and converting all of our cotton farms and our hemp farms over to this regenerative organic certification, which I'll explain a little bit more, I think in another question. And we're also seeing just a ton of support for what our department is doing and more questions on what more they can be doing. So I'm really excited about it because honestly, there's so much for support in the company for what we do, but I've just seen the ante go way up because of the new mission statement, so it's very exciting. And then just one more quick thing on our mission statement, we're in business to save our home planet. I love that our mission statement has home in it because I think that brings us all together, and it really increases the urgency of the climate crisis. We all live on this planet together. We all share a home together. And in a world where we're talking about being divided all the time and borders and things like that, well, quite frankly, we are all sharing Earth together, and we all need to take care of it. And it's so urgent that we do that.
And that's a perfect segue to Melissa's work, who's also very passionate about people and planet. It's wildlife and the people that coexist with it. Melissa, you manage supply chains in food and freshwater systems. Can you share a little bit about your work and maybe some of the innovations in technology that you've developed and how you collaborate with businesses to make it happen?
Sure, thanks. Well, thanks so much for inviting WWF, where we're not obviously a business, we're a nonprofit organization with a conservation focus. And it's a real privilege to sit with companies, and we do a lot of our work in partnership with companies. As Esha mentioned, our mission, very much aligned with Patagonia's actually, is to build a world where people live in harmony with nature. People know us by our iconic panda logo. It's very easy to copy in black and white. It translates globally. And we were founded with that mission to save biodiversity, but we're really an organization that cares about place and landscape and nature, but not nature for just nature's sake. It really is nature in terms of service and benefit to people and biodiversity in place. So in many ways, we have that shared vision and looking at the same a mindset and vision that Patagonia has is sort of where we partner with companies. And so a lot of the innovations we're looking at are around helping companies go on that journey. And as Cara mentioned, a lot of the impact of companies isn't really in their own footprint of their company itself, but it's in their supply chains and in the raw materials. So we work a lot with food and beverage companies. We work with textile companies on cotton, looking really at where the footprint is of what it is that they produce. And so we have a lot of work. I won't, in terms of looking at how to improve water efficiency, greenhouse gas emissions along supply chains, both in the U.S. but also in countries abroad, such as Brazil, where a lot of sourcing of really important raw materials are coming from these places where there's a lot of conservation priorities.
Jay, I'm sure you get this question a lot, but I think everybody here wants to advocate for a new economy, a new system to business. There's a lot of small businesses that are part of the B Corp movement. How do we get more multinationals and big companies to be a B Corp, and is that a realistic goal for the near future?
It's more than a goal, it's actually happening. And so I didn't realize that Andrea was formerly CEO of Avon, but one of the, now the largest certified B Corporation in the world is a Brazilian company called Natura, which is in a similar business to Avon. And they're now about a $10.5, $11 billion company. A few years ago, they bought The Body Shop. Most of us know that company. And just a couple weeks ago, they announced the acquisition of Avon. And so you've got large multi-billion-dollar global companies that are already certified B Corps that have already changed their legal DNA to require themselves to be accountable to people and planet, not just to profit, and to make sure they've got a fiduciary duty to balance those interests and not just maximize profit. And so if we want to protect the natural world on which all life depends, if we want to have an economy that serves everyone, we have to actually change the system, not just ask for more heroic individual leadership. Because you can ask somebody to be a heroic leader, but in a system that punishes that kind of leadership, that's an asymmetry of power. So Natura is one example. Danone is another example. Danone's a 30-something billion dollar French food conglomerate that's committed to sort of launching a food revolution all the way down to smallholder farmers. Their CEO, Emmanuel Faber, announced at his annual shareholder meeting in 2017 the intention for Danone to seek certification at the parent level. They already had 10 subsidiaries around the world that were certified B Corps, but they were the first Fortune 500 company to say, we're headed in that direction. That's our North Star, is we want to join a community of leaders that are meeting those most rigorous standards. There's other multinationals like Unilever that have a half dozen B Corp subsidiaries. They just acquired their 5th B Corp in the last 36 months, a supplement company called Ollie. They also acquired a company called Sundial that has an amazing brand called Shea Moisture. And the coolest, I just have to say this, the coolest thing about acquisition is the coolest term in any acquisition deal ever is the family ownership of Sundial got Unilever to agree to contribute to match their $20 or $30 million to create a fund called the New Voices Fund as a condition of the deal that would create the largest fund investing in women of color entrepreneurs in the United States. huge deal. And so not only did that business start as a scrappy startup up on 125th Street selling stuff, Grandma Sophie Tucker's recipes on the street. Then they turned that into a global brand. But then they said, how are we going to pay that forward and make sure that we know that the women that helped create the brand equity, the recipes that we use to create our personal care products, how do we pay that forward to the next generation of women leaders? And so that's kind of the spirit of the B Corp community in looking at the whole business from creation to sale to liquidity event, and how can we find more ways to create a positive impact in the world. And so you're seeing Unilevers and Danones and Naturas and P&G and Nestle and The Gap owns Athleta, also another B Corp, and The Gap also announced that they had the intention of becoming a certified B Corp when they split their stock. That will take place next year. So you've got a whole number of large multinationals that are all saying we want to be aligned with a community of leaders because of the leadership of folks like Patagonia over the last 10 years. That's created now a center of gravity and a sense of authenticity and trust and rigor that's attractive.
I'd like to ask a follow-up to that to Cara and Melissa. I mean, do you also see this kind of focus on profit maximization? Are we getting beyond that? Are we having more and more businesses that are interested in people and planet as much? I mean, obviously Patagonia is Cara, but are you seeing other companies, or are you interacting with other companies, Melissa?
Yes and no. We are seeing a ton more publicly traded companies join the sustainability movement through the Sustainable Apparel Coalition that we co-founded. So we're seeing a lot of critical mass in terms of moving forward. It's probably not as fast as we would like to see it. But I would say there's still a ton of publicly traded companies out there that are beholden to quarterly profits. That's the system they're in, right? And their commercial goals and their sustainability goals don't match, because sustainability is a long-term journey. And so there's a mismatch between the short-term thinking and the long-term thinking. And so I'm just seeing that still, that model is not doing us any favors, and quite frankly is one of the root causes of getting us into a climate crisis. So, it's B Corps that, this new model where you care about people and the environment, and you have to report on that and show that you're making progress. I mean, that's the wave of the future. I don't think there's any other way to go.
I appreciate the realistic perspective, and I very much agree that it is a challenging and difficult journey to do real transformational shifts in sustainability for companies. At the same time, I'd say there is a movement and a recognition from C-suite folks in major multinationals, as Jay was talking about, not just in boutique companies. So, a partner we have, for instance, Walmart, has a commitment for reducing their greenhouse gas emissions, Project Gigaton, and it's what they're doing in terms of partnership, not just with us, but a range of NGOs, is to really reverberate through their entire supply chain and getting consciousness raising around the importance of greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And so if you look at the World Economic Forum recent global risks reports for companies that came out earlier this year, 8 of the top 10 risks are environment or climate related. And so a lot related, as I mentioned, to the supply chains and the raw materials that companies need. And so there's a real acknowledgement of their own risk and business interests to deal with these things and put sustainability on the radar and making the business case for savings and what the risk mitigation means for them. There's also a real brand risk. I think consumers, like all of you, are much more conscious now about the values and brands that these companies represent. And I think we heard a lot from the previous panel about values, not so much politics, but values of these brands and what they stand for, and consumers care about that. And then the third thing we've heard from CEOs, which was very surprising to me, but very real, is attracting and keeping really talented labor and the brightest minds in their companies, like all of you. They have to be a company that their employees feel good about, and the employee retention and attracting the best talent is also driving CEOs to really have much more transformational approaches. And so I thought that was your voice and your influence in what you buy as a consumer, but also where you choose to work makes a difference as well.
Cara, I'd love to talk, about the specific movement towards regenerative cotton. And Patagonia has been an early adopter of organic cotton. The company was talking about it in the 90s when I don't think anybody else really was, and also becoming a fair trade brand. Where is all this change and movement coming from within the company? I think a lot of people want to know, what is the magic sauce behind Patagonia that keeps it going?
Sure. First, I wanted to ask everyone a question. Who buys organic food here? Awesome. Who buys organic cotton clothing? Yeah, it's lesser known. Yeah, I know. And it's kind of hard to find sometimes. I think, just to start out is that, there's a growing consciousness of putting more nutritious food that doesn't have chemicals sprayed on it for, pests and weeds and things like that, and GMOs, and just to be more mindful about what we're putting in our bodies on the food side. And we're seeing a trend on the apparel side too, and what you wear is so important, in that it's been grown and manufactured in a very responsible way. And so the initiatives we started at Patagonia, one of them is our Fair Trade Certified Clothing program, where I think we're getting close to 79% of our styles in the spring 20 season coming up will be Fair Trade certified, where we're giving money directly to workers into a bank account that they control, and they democratically decide how they're going to spend that money. And they're spending it on free childcare. They're spending it on cash bonuses that could get them closer to a living wage, which we're working on living wages as well in our apparel factories. And there's all these other wonderful projects that I would love to talk to you guys about, but there's not enough time. And then that's also led us to our regenerative organic certification that we created. And we created that certification with a lot of experts out there and other like-minded brands like Dr. Bronner's, and we also partner with the Rodale Institute to create this standard. And the reason we created it is, number one, if you take care of the soil, because we forgot that soil is gold. If you don't take care of it, meaning you're not spraying chemicals on it, you're not tilling it so much because it releases carbon into the air. If you take care of it, it's going to sequester more carbon. And the more carbon you draw down into the soil, you can actually mitigate climate change. It can reverse climate change. And so we created this standard with a pillar that handles regenerative agricultural practices like low or no tilling, intercropping, cover cropping, and things like that will help keep the microbes and the fungi and all that beautiful, wonderful stuff in the soil to keep the soil healthy. It holds more water. It creates a climate resiliency for farmers and their crops and things like that. It's a very beautiful, beautiful system that's been around actually for a very long time. And then the second pillar of the standard, it takes care of the social responsibility piece. So fairness for farmers and farm workers, and ensuring that their rights are being respected, and also they earn a living wage. It's a very high bar social standard. And then the third pillar of this agriculture standard is animal welfare. And we know that, animal welfare is kind of hit and miss. We go into Whole Foods and we see the different levels, which is really helpful. But, most, conventionally raised animals there's not a lot of animal welfare, and animals are being raised in a factory type setting on factory farms. And so this is the holy grail of responsible agriculture. It's for food and for fiber, so like cotton. It's being piloted right now by 21 different companies, mostly food companies. We're the only fiber pilot that's going on, and we're converting our organic cotton suppliers, 2 of them in India, to regenerative organic. And we've been doing this for a year now. It's been quite successful so far, and we're still collecting data on all the pillars that we're implementing. But it's just so hopeful, you guys. The farmers are earning more income from intercropping and cover cropping with food in between the cotton crops. And there's just so much good that can come out of this. So it's in pilot phase, but I'm hoping very soon, in the next year, maybe 2, you'll start seeing regenerative organic certified food, ROC, food, that stamp of approval on your food products, but also on your clothing as well.
Melissa, that's a good segue for your work because you spend a lot of time thinking about food supply chains. I mean, everybody in the audience, there's so many people in the audience here, I should say, think about organic food. How do you go about this with businesses? And when businesses come back to you and say, our supply chains are too complex, they're stretched out all over the world, how do you tackle that?
Yeah, and really appreciate and applaud the efforts Patagonia is doing. They really are cutting edge and innovative and forward-leaning. I think how we think about it is thinking the complexity for supply chains and the off-takers and retailers on where they're sourcing, but also you as consumers and choosing through a maze of things. And it's not always easy to discern and make sense of some of the labels. And I think those that are very educated and very aware know, and maybe it's 100% organic all the time. And I think some of the issues that Cara brought up is sometimes we don't have enough supply of these things to meet the full demand of everyone who needs to wear clothes, for instance. So a lot of what we're doing, first of all, I'd say companies definitely are, it's a globalized world. We have lots more technology. Those kinds of hiding behind those excuses that we can't understand and then figure out how to do more responsible sourcing is just over. I think the companies who are waking up to do this, it's hard, but they're making commitments to do it. And so some of them are, making these commitments and then trying to figure it out as they go. And so appreciate that they're innovative and learning as they go. But one of the big innovations that we have done over the past, I'd say 15 years in food and agriculture, but also in aquaculture and seafood, in forest products, is pre-competitive certification systems. So we very much applaud and appreciate organic, and there are lots of really wonderful and important practices done. But there's also environmental sustainability and a certain standard and level that before you go to a consumer, you would like to know that that is just the bar there before it goes into any of the product lines, whether it goes into a Walmart brand, a Target brand, or Eileen Fisher, or whatever your brand is. You would like to know that cotton has just had a minimum bar of sustainability there, or salmon, or soy, or if you want to eat meat, if you choose to. So we've been working on that pre-competitive platform, and then having demand from all of the off-takers, and it's not just the retailers, it's like Cargill's and Bunge's, those big guys that are buying it and then selling the products to the companies that you know of. It would be so much better if they all could just meet a minimum bar. So we've been working behind the scenes. There's forest sustainable certified products. You might see this FSC label on paper products. We have MSC marine certified certification, marine sustainable certification. ASC is for aquaculture, and we've been doing it. There's responsible sourced palm oil, RSPO. So on very key commodities that we have mapped out over the years that are the drivers of degradation globally, where they are just ripping down rainforests to put in palm oil or coffee sugar, etc. We've been working on these so that you don't even have to think about it, right? You just know when you buy that if 80% of palm oil is coming out of an RSPO certified, at least it's meeting a minimum. And I'll say that has been an amazing development, and it's been going through multiple commodities, not just one or two. But I will also allude to it's not enough. I think we've been doing this for 15 years, and we realize that there are still a need to land it in landscapes, and we have to be more vigilant. It's a minimum thing, but we ourselves are evolving, and I won't go into all the details, but it's still not enough in terms of what we need to do to really help save the planet.
So I think we have time for one more question, and it would be to all of you, is that we have so many women in the audience here who maybe run a business or are an integral role of a business. What would be your call to action? How do we spread this movement of better businesses, around the world even faster?
My call to action, I actually thought this one, is if you own a business, the most urgent thing that we need to work on is climate change. I urge everyone to set climate targets to reduce your own CO2 emissions and then work on them progressively to reduce them. We only have about 10 years left before the point of no return, and quite frankly, I think it's going to be a lot less than that. Societies will be changing. There's a ton of information on the internet right now that's very credible to say that, our world is going to change, societies are going to change. So it's so important that everyone start working on that. So if you're a company, please set targets. And we're all consumers, right? We're all customers of brands. And, the most powerful thing you can do is buy less, buy higher quality goods, and then do your homework when you're making purchases on clothing and big home purchases to see how those companies are handling their sustainability. Are they reporting on what they're doing? Are they setting climate targets? Really support those brands.
Jay?
Sure. So this is going to sound a little odd, but I would say the most important thing you can do is go back to the companies that you work for, whether they're your own or somebody else's, and figure out how you can engage in the B Corp movement. And the issue is not because you should become a certified B Corp, but the issue is because we're stronger together as a community than any of us are individually, and this is going to require really intense collaboration and collective action, whether it's to address climate change or widening racial wealth gaps, or but because all of those things are symptomatic of an underlying structural systemic design flaw in capitalism. We're business leaders, and so we are pro business, we are pro capitalist. We're not trying to change the system, we're trying to transform that system so it is not hardwired to degrade natural systems, it is not hardwired for oppression of social systems and marginalized frontline communities. And so we're not going to be able to change that system and rewire the source code of capitalism so it's people-centered and community-centered and not profit-centered unless we do that collectively. And the movement of certified B corporations, there are 6 times more businesses led by, businesses with employees led by women in the B Corp community than in the general community at large. And so we are both wanting to reflect more of women's leadership. We desperately need more women's leadership in this movement. Because I think that a feminine leadership is going to show up with in a spirit of care that is going to recognize that what you're caring for is not just the bottom line of profits, but what you're caring for is the people that you're working with. You're in relationship with the people at every part of your supply chain, with the people that are coming into work every day, with the people that are buying your stuff. In general, in my life experience, women are more relational, men are more transactional, and we need an economy that is more relational. And so the issue is not like go become a B Corp because it's an awesome certification and it's really cool. Come on that journey to be part of a community of practice that is trying to overthrow shareholder primacy and put people at the center of the economy. We really need your help.
It's funny, mine's even more abstract, and I feel like it's a great progression from the issue to the build a social movement, and then mine was really about to point it to you as an individual. So it's a good segue, and mine is really about engaging you. You have to engage with heart and head, and that I think there's so much overwhelming things out there that it feels kind of demoralizing and disconcerting, and that you sort of just disengage and feel like it's overwhelming and there's nothing that I can do. And so I really urge you to engage, as Cara gave really specifics on climate change, and I couldn't agree more that the sense of urgency. But I think it's important to pick, in addition to climate change, one of our messages as WWF is that there are all sorts of assaults on the planet right now. And by 2030, we're going to have a 40% global water gap where we will be over-extracting water, and communities are not going to have basic drinking water or water for irrigation and agriculture. We are deforesting and having major issues around landscape changes, and we've had an 80% decrease in freshwater species and 66% decline in global mammal species. So there's so many assaults, and that climate change may be the last thing, because we have really bigger issues also, not bigger, but additional issues on nature now. And so I think the thing is to find what is passionate for you. And the other issue that I feel is so critical is the inequality and the poverty. Jay talked a lot about the social disparities that we are seeing, between the world, but even in our own country and in our own cities. And so pick what is that issue for you, and then figure out through yourself, your own actions, through where you work, through your colleagues, through, do something and don't disengage. Engage, make a difference. It's heart and head. You're such smart, talented, competent, networked women and colleagues and men too. And I agree with Jay that we need to build a movement, build a community, turn the tides. We just can't sit idly by.
Thank you. So now we have some questions, I understand, from social media for the panel, so you're not off the hook yet.
Yeah, we've got one question that came through. How do you take better business and climate change targets to consumers in poorer developing countries that are more concerned about basic poverty and day-to-day survival?
Yeah, I'll take that one. This is a great question because the people in the poorest parts of the world are the hardest hit on climate change, and the richest nations are actually the ones that are causing most of climate change. So this is a very concerning situation. So what we're doing is one of the movements that I personally and our team has been really interested in is climate justice, and not leaving anyone behind as we're trying to solve for climate change. What we're going to be doing is a lot of our suppliers are in developing countries, and our field management staff in Asia, in Latin America, are telling us that the factories are hotter. There's fires, there's floods, there's all sorts of concerns that are related to climate change. And so we're trying to understand what can Patagonia do to help the people that are making our products become more climate resilient and to address some of the concerns that are happening right now. We already have programs in place to deal with water or heat stress, extra water breaks, and some of our factories even have air conditioning, but then that also contributes to climate change, right? So it's just a really hard equation. And we need to keep reaching out to developing countries and understanding what they need and what the consumers down there need. And it's a really, really tough problem that not a lot of people are talking about right now. And that's why we're so interested in Mary Robinson's climate justice movement.
Okay. I also wanted to chime in. I think a lot of the work we're doing in food systems and agriculture, we tend at WWF actually to focus on protein value chains. And that includes, value chains that are trying to deliver the world the nutrition that we need. And there's a lot of malnutrition or undernutrition in developing countries, and they need better quality and nutrition-dense foods. Often those foods, not always, but often they are sourced from animal products and can have a higher footprint on the environment as a result. And so I think we are trying to work on envisioning a food and fiber system that meets better the needs of the human population to deliver that nutrition. We're going to have 10 billion people by 2050. 821 million people are still undernourished in the world. 2.1 billion are obese, and often they're in the same households or in the same countries. And so there's this dichotomy of what the food system is supposed to do and how to still do it within the planetary boundaries and not rape and pillage the earth or create more havoc and climate change. And we believe we can do that, right? So developing countries have a lower per capita footprint because their consumption is so low and the systems are not intensified, but yet they're not as efficient and they're not producing as much as they could. And so we want to up the game of how efficient in production they can be, and we want to be able to deliver more quality nutrition for those folks, but we don't want to increase the footprint so much, and we definitely need to reduce overconsumption in our own country, where we have the lowest per capita rates of production efficient, or lowest greenhouse gas emissions per unit of production, but we just overconsume so much of things that cost the environment so much. And so it's trying to level the playing field and trying to leapfrog, in terms of how we might look at sustainable intensification and access to good nutrition in these countries, and really envisioning a different kind of food system that does both nourish people as well as nourish the planet.
Do we have any more questions from social media? No? Should we open it up to the audience for one quick question? Does anybody have a question that they'd like to ask? I see a hand right here. Can we get her a mic, or can you maybe say it really loudly and I'll repeat?
No. What I was thinking about when you talk about shareholder primacy is, where are my options if I'm lucky enough to have a 401k? Where are my options to invest in a fund that only invests in companies that have high social responsibility? Like, where are the Fidelities, the Vanguards, and all those people in this movement?
So the question was, how do you invest your own savings and your own funds into companies that practice these values?
Right, so it's a great question, and there's a huge socially responsible investing category out there that represents somewhere between 11 and $14 trillion worth of assets under management that I would say is like the easy entry point into this space. Most of that money is basically saying yes to everything, but no to some what they call sin stocks: alcohol, tobacco, firearms, sometimes fossil fuels, child labor, things like that. And that's a perfectly good on-ramp because it's sort of giving you like broad access to public equities while just excising those things that are bad. You can go deeper than that. There's deeper ends of the pool that are harder to find and access. There's an organization called like RSF Social Finance as an example. And it's very accessible to retail investors. So if you're trying to think about, you're not a super high net worth individual that can't do a bunch of private equity or venture investing, where there's a lot of great impact investing going on, sort of direct investing. But RSF is a great resource where they have mostly debt-driven funds that you can put your money into that are 100% focused on creating transformational positive impact in education, around land and soil, and regenerative ag, and other things like that would be like one example. One other thing that would be accessible to everybody is, well, not everybody, many people have banks, have a bank account. And you could move your money tomorrow to a bank that actually uses your money to invest in positive change in communities. And so you can invest in a bank, or you put your money at Amalgamated Bank here in New York City, the oldest labor union bank in the US. They just acquired another B Corp bank out west called New Resource Bank that's more on the environmental side. And it's public. It just went public last year, so it's been around for almost 100 years with broad, all the great banking services. But you know that when you're banking with Amalgamated, your deposits are going to be turned around as loans into local communities that are going to be pro-justice and pro-community and pro-environment. And so there's banks you can use, or credit unions. There's folks like RSF, Social Finance, Calvert, other places, and then there's sort of basic socially responsible investing. And if you're lucky enough to have a bunch of money, there's a ton of impact investment opportunities that are scouring the earth for incredible investment opportunities in private companies that are doing transformational change, like the next Patagonias of the world.
Thank you so much. We are out of time, I am being told. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Cara. Thank you, Melissa. And I hope we tackled some of the world's problems.